You'd think a quiet evening at our cozy riverside cabin in Willow Creek, Oregon, would be all about sipping coffee and watching the sunset ripple across the water. But on that crisp October evening in 2024, I came home to find my wife, Emma, sitting on the porch steps, her hands fidgeting as she stared at the shiny new gate lock she'd just installed. Her hazel eyes kept flicking toward the winding dirt path that led through the pines to the river's edge, like she was waiting for trouble to come charging out of the dusk. The tension in her face hit me like a punch to the gut. "I had to do something," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and unease as I approached. I couldn't keep lying awake, wondering if that creep would come back. The lock gleamed in the fading light, solid and unyielding, a symbol of her resolve. This wasn't just about security, it was about taking back control. Last week, while I was away on a work trip, Emma had woken up at 2 a.m. to a stranger strolling through our backyard like it was his personal highway to the river. The guy, some middle-aged drifter, had the nerve to claim he'd always used that path to fish and acted like she was the one trespassing on our land. After he finally wandered off, muttering about his rights, Emma spent the night pacing, double-checking every lock, and calling me in tears at 4 a.m. She felt violated in the one place we'd built to feel safe. The next day, she marched to the hardware store and bought the sturdiest lock she could find, determined to never feel that helpless again. I sat beside her on the porch, pulling her close. "You don't have to be scared anymore," I said, my voice steady but my chest tight with anger. This cabin, nestled among towering pines with the river sparkling like a sheet of glass, was our haven. We'd poured everything into it: tour savings, our dreams, our need for a place to escape the world's noise. No one had the right to make us feel unsafe here. But less than 2 hours later, trouble came knocking in the form of Margaret Hayes, the HOA president, storming up our driveway like a wildfire. Her face was red, her steps sharp, and she clutched a folder like it was a weapon. I'd seen Margaret around our little community plenty of times, always barking orders or nitpicking about mailbox colors. But tonight, she looked unhinged, her usual polished demeanor fraying at the edges. "You have no right to do this," she shrieked, jabbing a finger at the lock like it was a bomb. "This blocks the community's river access. Every resident has a right to that path." Her phone was already out, thumb hovering over 911 like she was about to declare war. Before Emma or I could get a word in, she was dialing, her voice booming with self-righteous fury. "I'm reporting an illegal obstruction of community property," she announced into the phone, glaring at us like we'd committed a felony. The speed of her escalation was dizzying. No discussion, no neighborly chat, just straight to threats. It felt like we'd stepped into a nightmare. When Officer Daniels arrived, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on a quiet Tuesday night, he listened to Margaret's rant with a patient but weary expression. She waved her arms, her voice climbing higher with every sentence, insisting our lock was a crime against the neighborhood. But when Daniels asked for proof official documents showing the path was public, she froze, fumbling through her purse like a kid caught cheating on a test. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "if this is private property, these folks can secure it however they want. Got any county records showing a public easement?" Margaret's face turned crimson, and she stormed off, muttering about violations and consequences. That night, I couldn't sleep. Margaret's absolute certainty gnawed at me. What if we'd missed something? The next morning, Emma and I tore through boxes of old paperwork in our dusty basement, inherited from her great-grandfather who'd owned this land since the 1970s. Among the faded deeds and yellowed letters, Emma found a manila envelope that stopped us cold. Dated November 3rd, 1974, it was a legal agreement stating her great-grandfather had donated riverfront land with one ironclad condition: access remained exclusive to his family forever. The document was signed, sealed, and notarized, with surveys and photos showing every boundary line. "We own the river access," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with relief and disbelief. How did Margaret not know this? But then we found an addendum, buried under the main deed, written in dense legal jargon. It mentioned community consideration and neighborly cooperation in exercising our rights. Was it just a suggestion to play nice, or did it weaken our claim? The uncertainty crept back, and just as we were grappling with it, an official-looking HOA notice slid under our door. First notice: unauthorized obstruction of community access route. It read in bold. Comply within 14 days or face $5,000 fines and legal action. The timing felt like a calculated jab, and the threatening tone screamed intimidation. Something about it felt off, like someone was trying too hard to sound legit. I decided to confront Margaret directly. I found her in her pristine garden, yanking weeds with a fury that matched her mood. "Margaret, we need to talk," I said, keeping my voice even. "There's information you don't have about the river access." I spread out photocopies of our documents, hoping reason might cut through her anger. Her face paled as she read, her hands shaking. "This can't be right," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "This means everything I've been told about community rights is wrong." The confident HOA tyrant was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely rattled. My lawyer, Thomas Reed, confirmed our rights the next day in his oak-paneled office. "These documents are bulletproof," he said, peering through his glasses. "Your family has owned that access since 1974. The HOA has no claim." But then he dropped a bomb. The HOA had been charging river maintenance fees for 20 years without any legal right. "That's fraud," he said grimly. And Margaret's threats? They could be extortion. The numbers were staggering: thousands collected from every family. The Wilsons, scraping by on a fixed income, had paid for years. The Garcias, drowning in mortgage debt, had skipped vacations to cover those fees. Thomas laid out our options: send a cease and desist letter, file a county complaint, and document everything. But he warned that Margaret had just filed an emergency injunction, claiming our lock violated environmental laws. This wasn't just a neighborhood spat, Anna Maria, it was a legal war. Emma couldn't sleep for days, haunted by the escalation. "We can't back down," she said at 2 a.m., staring out at the river's moonlight. "Margaret made this a fight. We have to finish it." Her fear had hardened into resolve, and I felt a surge of pride. We called an emergency neighborhood meeting at our cabin. The room buzzed with tension as neighbors packed in, their faces a mix of worry and anger. "You've all been paying illegal fees for years," I said, holding up our documents. "The HOA doesn't own the river access." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Garcias calculated decades of payments on their phones, their faces darkening. "We can't afford lawyers," Mrs. Garcia said, her voice cracking. "But we need our money back." Others, like Mr. Larson, were furious. "This is theft," he shouted. "Margaret's been scamming us." Then Margaret dropped a bombshell at the meeting. Sobbing, she admitted she'd been covering up embezzlement by the previous HOA president, Victor, who'd stolen $40,000 before fleeing to Arizona. She'd used her own savings to hide the losses, desperate to protect the community. But the real shock came when she revealed that Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the sweet elderly neighbor who baked cookies for everyone, had been Victor's accomplice, feeding Margaret false information to keep the fraud hidden. "Evelyn convinced me to be aggressive," Margaret choked out. "She set me up to take the fall." The room erupted. Evelyn, caught making a frantic call in the parking lot, had said, "They found the documents. We need to move fast." Her kindly facade vanished, revealing a calculating criminal. The next morning, the county prosecutor called Margaret someone had tipped off the state, framing her as the mastermind. But their accountant quickly proved Margaret had been covering losses, not stealing. Evelyn, it turned out, had been embezzling more through fake invoices, using her trusted status as cover. Her tip to the authorities was a desperate bid to pin it all on Margaret. Federal agents got involved when they traced Evelyn's money transfers across state lines. What started as a gate lock dispute exploded into a conspiracy involving wire fraud and a corporate developer eyeing our riverfront for a takeover. Evelyn fled, her house emptied overnight, but she was caught and pleaded guilty to felony fraud. Victor was extradited and faced harsher charges. Margaret, cooperating fully, faced only misdemeanors and began community service, later becoming our community coordinator under strict oversight. A year later, in October 2025, Emma and I sat on our rebuilt dock, the river glowing under the sunset. We'd recovered $72,000 in stolen funds, and new HOA bylaws ensured transparency. A brass plaque by our gate read, "Harper Family River Access, shared with Community Trust, established 1974, renewed 2025. Our lock had exposed a conspiracy and saved our neighborhood. But as we watched the water, questions lingered. Who else knew about Evelyn's scheme? Was the developer still watching? Should we have pushed for harsher punishment? Or was redemption the right call? What would you have done, fought for justice or settled quietly? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if this story gripped you. And subscribe for more wild tales of real-life drama.